The resigned Generalissimo came to power to save his country from the ruin of anarchy and popular sentiment. He is tired of political bickering and tries to run the country as he used to command his regiment. Still, he is a competent and decisive man. So what can I say? God is good. Jair Bolsonaro, it looks like he's going to win the general election. It's almost a certainty at this point, unless they dramatically rig the vote or whatever. The current, he very, very narrowly missed winning outright. How it works is in Brazil and in most runoff electoral systems is in the first round, if no candidate gets 50% of the vote, then they have a second election in which the top two candidates go off against each other. The idea being that somebody is going to get 50% of the vote or more. So in this case, Bolsonaro only got 46% of the vote, so they're going to have a second round. But given that he's basically got half of the vote and his closest opponent only got 29% of the vote, he only has to find 4.1% among the other political parties. And there are other right-wing political parties that ran. Like, let's see here. No, they're center-right, Patriotia or whatever. Okay, we have another far-right Christian party. How much is that? That's like another 2.5. I don't think it's going to be too hard for him to find. There's a Christian Democrat party. I'm sure they'll vote for him. Let's see here. There's the Brazilian Social Democratic Party, which is kind of a mixed bag. But I'm pretty sure he can find 4% somewhere among the rest of these guys. So it looks like Bolsonaro is going to be the new president of Brazil, almost certainly at this point in time, unless they rig the election. Interestingly, he managed to win southern Brazil, which I didn't think he would, because I figured southern Brazil would be too, I guess you could say, dildo to vote for him. But yeah, so Jair Bolsonaro is going to win. He's a very interesting man. Obviously, if you look at him, he's a mega Chad. I think he's like 6'1". He was in the army for 17 years. He was a captain in the paratroopers. His sons are also massive Chads. You can't help but love the guy. No homo, but I have to say I always found Bolsonaro to be a really good looking guy. Like I said, he's just very Chad, and he has very pleasant blue eyes. But like I said, no homo. Anyways, so people wanted my take on the Brazilian election. I think the thing you have to understand with regards to Latin America and to the third world countries in general is you can't impose your sense of political morality. That is, you can't pretend that Brazil should have a similar type of leader that Canada should have or America should have. There are things you have to do as the president of Brazil that you don't have to do as the prime minister of Canada or the president of the United States. It's a very different environment. It's like when Duterte came to power in the Philippines. I was kind of somewhat supportive of his program of just wiping out drug use because the Philippines is very different from Canada or US. And he is a lunatic, I'm not going to lie. And he would be a lunatic, a complete psycho if he ran a Western country. But in the context of the Philippines, it actually makes quite a bit of sense. So why am I talking about this? Because a lot of people think Bolsonaro is extreme. He kind of is, which is a good thing in my books. But he has very strong rhetoric in terms of he wants to return to military dictatorship. He doesn't like democracy. He wants basically Brazil to go back to the way it used to be. And he's obtained an immense amount of public support. I mean, the fact that he did so well in the first round, despite being portrayed as a fringe candidate, is interesting because people have been calling him a fringe candidate. But how could he be a fringe candidate if he got a massive, almost majority of the vote on the first ballot? It doesn't make any sense. And I think to a lot of people outside of Latin America, it's just something that they can't really comprehend. How did this guy win? How did he win by such a huge margin? How could the population vote for someone that extreme? Okay, firstly, I think the thing you have to understand about Latin America is machismo. People in Latin America are just very passionate and they just go over the top when they're talking. So is some of Bolsonaro? I don't doubt Bolsonaro's everything he says he is. That he's a hardcore social conservative. That he wants the military back in power. That he hates the direction Brazil's gone in. But you also have to understand he does seem like a bit of a troll. So I'm sure he said stuff just to irritate people. Like if you look at his interview with Ellen Page, he's like, "You're a good-looking girl. I would whistle at you if you walked by my barracks." Like he'll say stuff that I think is just there to troll people or to irritate people. Also, just men in Latin America have to be big men. They have to show off how masculine they are. And part of showing off how masculine they are is just to be the most extreme possible. Like, when I'm president, I'm gonna kill 10,000 criminals. Well, when I'm president, I'm gonna kill 30,000 criminals. And you get into to kind of arguments like that. So that's one perspective of it. It's just the rhetoric is just very different there. How people behave is very different. And Bolsonaro personally is a populist and he's kind of a troll. Once again, and that's not to say he doesn't believe all the things he says he believes, but I think obviously there's a troll aspect to him. So also we have to look at this before we even get to Brazil in particular, we have to look at the context of what Latin America is like. And I studied Latin America a fair amount when I was in university. So the reality of Latin America is it's probably the most unequal part of the world. Now, within the regards to Africa, you might say that's more unequal, but Africa has a ruling class than everyone else. It doesn't even really have an upper class in the way we would understand an upper class. In Latin America, there's a relatively large upper class. There's a small middle class, although the middle class is functionally kind of more like the upper class. And then there's everybody else in society. There's very gross inequality in these societies. And part of that is just practical because some of the groups are just naturally more successful than others. I'm sure you get where I'm going with that. Also, just the way the societies are run, it's kind of more of a feudal system almost, where patronage is a lot more important. There's kind of a clique who support each other and tend to run the government. But my point is, there is a huge underclass in most Latin American societies. And this is kind of like, if you were to, like, let me think of kind of equivalent. Let's say you were to take ghetto America, give them more agency and make them 70% of or like 50% of the population. And try to have that society function. That's what it would be like. That's kind of a way of thinking about Latin America. Where it's just not like in Africa where everybody's dysfunctional. It's like half the population is dysfunctional and the other half is functional. So what kind of winds up happening, and particularly in Brazil, is the socialist government has just been providing massive welfare to the lower classes and encouraging them to breed like rabbits. So as they've bred, the favelas have been overflowing. And what happens a lot, particularly in Brazil, is the children get abandoned and they grow up on the streets and they become child soldiers for drug cartels. There's like street gangs of street. I think that the movie that really covers it well is the film City of God. So you'll get just these you'll get like tens of thousands of these kids, and they'll be running around with guns, and they'll be addicted to drugs, and they'll just shoot people. And the drug cartels basically rule the favelas. Kind of an example of how things function in Latin America, this is in Mexico, is in Mexico, for most of its existence, kind of as a modern country, the drug cartels weren't that big an issue. I mean, they were there, but we didn't have anything resembling the violence of the Mexican drug war. What wound up happening is the Institutional Revolutionary Party lost power, and one of their big backers had been the drug cartels. And they elected the conservatives, the People's Action Party. And the People's Action Party said, we aren't going to take bribes anymore. We're going to stand up to the drug cartels. We're going to deal with corruption. We're going to be the first government since the Mexican Revolution to try to deal with it. And the drug cartels said, if you've seen that scene in the Prince of Egypt, where the God's just unleashing the plagues upon the Egyptians until they agree to let his people go. It's kind of like that. So the cartels just decided to kill as many people as possible in order until the Mexican public would give in. And to be fair to the Mexican people, they actually elected Calderon, so they did elect a second conservative, and then they finally gave up, and the PRI came back into power, and almost immediately things settled down quite a bit because the PRI just got rid of all the anti-cartel policies that were in place. So I know that's Mexico, but I'm just saying that's the way politics works in Latin America. You can't try to take the fundamental realities of like Canada or America and superimpose it over a very different system. My point is, people in these countries, particularly the middle class, like military dictatorship. If the military is in power, then that means they can shoot anybody they want. And that may sound bad to us, but a lot of the people that they want to shoot are the scum of society. And the scum of society in Latin America is like 10 to 20% of the population. Drug cartels, street gangs, political radicals. I don't mean like even like the organized Communist Party. I mean like part of what started the dirty war in Argentina was urban guerrillas. Like a lot of Marxist guerrillas just started blowing shit up in urban areas, etc. So like you have an orgy of violence in a lot of Latin American countries. Like Colombia for a very long time, and Colombia's, I know I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but Colombia is interesting because it's a case where the government was not corrupt and did continue to stand up to the terrorists and the drug cartels, and they had decades of just brutal warfare until Urabe came to power. I think that's how you pronounce his name, and just was a hard ass and just fucking shut everything down. So kind of what winds up happening in Latin American countries, if there isn't a military government, the middle class will pay death squads who are off-duty soldiers or police officers to go and call the lower classes. So they'll send them to just go kill all the cartel members, to go kill street kids, to basically just clean the streets of the garbage. And in a first world country, this seems horrible to us. But what you have to understand is in a country like Brazil, you can't take out your cell phone in public. In a country like Brazil, they have something called quick napping, where they'll grab you off the street, take you to an ATM, hold a gun to your head, and make you withdraw money. In a country like Brazil, you can't wear a skirt on a subway because the rape rate's so high, the crime rate's so high. The country is a fucking just a disaster zone. And don't even get me started about the favelas. That's what it's like even in safer cities, like in Sao Paulo. Rio is, I think, under military occupation at the moment. But just the dregs of society in Latin America are like 20 to 30% of the population. And this is kind of the reality. This is the future you chose. This is what it looks like when you build a society with this massive underclass of people with high time preference and low impulse control. And when you construct it, this is what we have to look forward to into the West once all the refugees, quote unquote, integrate into society. A world in which the middle class has to pay death squads to kill the lower orders so they can live some semblance of a normal life. It's not because they are like sadistic or evil or anything. They just, I mean, like think about it. If you were a father, would you rather pay some off-duty cops to go kill some gangbangers or have your daughter raped? I mean, I think to most people that is an easy question. And so the middle class is crying out to Bolsonaro to save them. Because if you look at it, the wealthier parts of Brazil tended to support him. Yeah, like southern Brazil, inner Brazil, etc. Whereas the poorer parts wanted the system to continue. So you have that aspect of it. Within the context of Brazil, specifically, we've had like decades of misrule by the Workers' Party. Lula and his gang have massively increase the amount of money that goes to poor people. Like I said, to try to breed them, to try to breed an army so that they can permanently stay in power. There's been massive corruption. Lula, when he was running, got arrested, if memory serves, in his jail. That's the only reason Bolsonaro can win, because I think both of his main opponents got arrested and put in jail under massive corruption charges. So, like, that's just kind of the reality. Is they had this horrific government for 2 decades that severely corruption, just let national security go to shit, and the middle class is tired of having their money stolen to feed the lower orders, and they're tired of not being able to be safe, and so they call out for somebody. I think the other thing is, and people think that Latin America is this conservative paradise. Social liberalism is, if anything, stronger in Latin America. Brazil is infamous for its feminism, for its just general dildo policies, etc. In many cases, it's worse than in North America, because affirmative action is much stronger there than it is in most Western countries. So you have this backdrop, and people are looking to a strongman. People want somebody to come in and sweep away the filth. They want to be secure again. They want to be prosperous again. They want a government like that supports them and doesn't just have a nihilistic desire to stay in power. And the situation's gotten so bad that Bolsonaro said he's going to perform a coup if he loses the election, pretty much. And that's kind of the background. That's the context of Latin America. That's the context of Brazil. And like I said, I mean, look at it. The middle class has said we aren't going to put up with this anymore. We're tired of it. You know, it's interesting. Brazil also has a huge problem with immigration from Haiti, Africa, the Middle East. They're tired of it. Other parts of Latin America, like Bolivia and Venezuela, and they want Bolsonaro to come in and deal with the problem. And he's going to deal with the problem. It's going to probably take a mountain of bodies, but at this point, it's just, it has to be done. I know it's a cliche. You have to do what you have to do, and there's not really an option at this point. So that's kind of the background. That's kind of the context. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys later.